without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this, he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. What is faith? Verse 6 is very helpful. Biblical faith has this foundation. You must believe that God exists. This is the watershed, the great divide. There are only two types of people in this world: those who believe that the most important fact that a human being could ever consider and give assent to is the existence of God, and those who either casually or philosophically deny his existence. But intellectually, commitment to God's existence is not all that faith is about. Faith means you live as though you believe in God's existence, or as though you believe, as the writer says, he rewards those who seek him. Faith is a deep-seated belief in the existence of God that radically alters the way you live your life. Now, here's the rub. Faith isn't natural for us. Biblical faith is counterintuitive and countercultural. So we even need God's grace to have faith, to believe in the existence of the one whose grace we so desperately need. And the grace is yours for the asking again today. And then for further study and encouragement, you can read James chapter 2, verses 14 to 26. So that was just the April 10th devotion. And that's like totally what we're talking about today with the naturalism. It's just neat. All right. Well, so naturalism. I guess we'll, okay. I guess I will start out with asking, well, we'll just kind of do a little review here. Naturalism is the belief that natural causes are sufficient to explain everything in our world. And materialism is the belief that nature, that is material stuff, is all that exists. Material things can be studied with the five senses. Immaterial things, morals, the human soul, angels, demons, and God cannot. However, the irony of claiming the material world is all there is that this is metaphysical, outside of the physical realm, or philosophical statement. The meaning of those words is not material. Not only is it immaterial and philosophical, but it is an untestable assumption, an allegation that is often brought against Christians. There have been a whole smear of hypotheses offered throughout history to explain away the existence of a God who is uncreated, self-existent, and powerful enough to create the universe. The solution? Hypothesize something else that is uncreated, self-existent, and capable of creating. Mama bears, listen closely when I say this. Every hypothesis about origins is eventually reduced to something that, one, has always existed, is eternal, two, needs no creator, is self-existent, and three, is sufficiently powerful to create. Aristotle called this the first cause. Do not let anyone tell you that their first cause is more scientific than yours. So, when you skim the chapter, before you read the chapter, did you have a question on the top of your head that you were hoping this would help you answer, or not this one?
I didn't really have a question on this chapter.
Okay.
What I don't know. I read this, I get a blog that's called Coffee and COVID.
Oh, okay.
From a lawyer down in Florida, but
Okay.
he has a lot of sarcasm and a lot of tongue-in-cheek things. And one of the things he writes a lot is like science exclamation mark, and kind of making fun of how everything's always like, let's look at the science, and then the science is changing, and your science, not my science, or whatever. And that's all that kept popping in my head the whole time I read this chapter was, you know, that there's so much when it comes to evolution and all the different things when we talk about what we believe, really all comes down to faith. Even evolution comes down to faith. It's just different faith.
Yeah. Where does your faith lie? And in the end, it's like, if you know that, you know, that whole saying, I mean, it's so like not profound, but the worst, if I'm wrong, the thing that's saying like why I believe or don't you believe. And it's like,
The worst thing
being
that's going to happen if we're wrong, then what? Nothing
Right.
really
I'm
bad
gonna be in the
happens.
ground, yeah.
right.
But if we're
And so-
right, then
Exactly. So it's like, why would you choose to put your faith in something that doesn't have a good ending no matter what? You know what I mean? Like, and we obviously being, having the gift of, faith through our baptism, through, the Holy Spirit, through, that's such a gift, because it is such a difficult world to live in. And we are constantly, even when it was talking about, like, when we get into like pre-modernism and modernism and postmodernism, like how many centuries went by before it went to modernism. It was like the 17th century or whatever. And from the beginning of time till then, I mean, they always had that process of like some God, like either God the Father, or, of other nations, but it was like, it was very black and white, and then, but once they got into, more science and starting to question things, and they get to modernism, and now we're, now we're in this postmodernism, and it's like, it's an absolute miracle to have faith, because that's all God, so if he's given us that gift, then we need to be staying as close to him as possible in the word, to just keep that protected. Like, that's the special gift it is. What do we do with special priceless gifts? If we have a super fancy diamond that was our great grandma's or whatever, we lock it up, we put it in a safe, we, things that are very precious, we protect. Well, what's more precious than the gift of salvation, and the faith that we have? So, just if you, let's see, well, we'll get into that. So the scientific method. Okay. So we know the scientific method. That's something that I've been many times, thrown at me, like, well, duh, if it does it match the scientific method? Especially when like COVID and the shot and the masks were really like 24/7 being talked about. You can't argue with an unbeliever about, in the end, where you just put your faith in God. Like, they're not good, because that's not a scientific method to them. That now you're just an absolute lunatic and they don't want to talk to you. But yeah, I do like how the book really gets into the whole, like, science being its own God, really. I mean, and even Fauci said that.
Well,
like,
yeah,
science.
like on page 103, and this, you see this so much in the last few years, but where it's towards the bottom, and it just says people started using science as a means of replacing God.
Yes.
That's all I can see right now, is even with some Christians, like,
Right.
I don't think they're intentionally trying to do that. But when you get somebody, that was what was hard for me during the last 2 years, is that people that were my friends that I was close to, who were in the same faith, they couldn't see how much faith they were putting in human reason, that they, because science said. But I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so like, I'm 49 and I'm thinking through my life, how many times has science changed?
Right.
Even from when I was a kid. Remember when margarine was supposed to be good for us?
Yes.
Oh,
And
I mean, yeah.
so it's just like, why are you putting your faith? Why you aren't at least giving me the benefit of the doubt just to listen to what I have to say? Because, I know somebody that she ended up getting the shot not because she really believed in it, but because, she is a business owner.
Sure.
And, she's a hairdresser, and she just was tired of being pressured by her clients. She didn't want to lose her business. But even she's like, I can just see this now. How many years from now there's going to be commercials on, if you were like hurt by this? And I'm like, there won't be that. She's like, well, why not? And I said, because you can't sue over this.
Yeah.
it says, it isn't a medication. And she's like, oh man, so it's like people just, she even knew that this isn't perfect.
Right.
So she didn't bother me, but other people.
No, I know.
Yeah.
There's so many. I mean, we just had a good friend here that he works at the big power plant over in Two Rivers. And I mean, he's an engineer there. He's been there for like 13 years. He's quite high up, and he just like, but he's very classy with how he's dealt with this. His wife has had a much, I mean, he's gotten angry, but like God's given him, he's put up with a lot for a long time. Like, home testing 3 times a week this entire time. Then he did test positive once, and he couldn't go back to work until like 6 weeks because he kept testing positive, even though he never was sick. Well, they've done the nuclear power plant is terrible here. Like Nancy Pelosi was here one day. Like there's something big going on there, like, in terms of who is running the show over there. But he finally started having issues. Like, I mean, he has his own like big office, like he runs things, and he was having a hard time getting in to things on his computer that he normally needs to get into. And who else was having a hard time getting into those things? Those who weren't wearing a mask or didn't have the shot. So he said, what's going on here? I can't do my work if I can't get, oh yeah, we're having some glitches. And they're like, well, ironically, everyone having the glitches are us. Well, that's what, like, they were being locked out of things. And then he was getting like, certain coworkers or whatever were emailing the boss, like complaining that he wasn't wearing a mask and stuff. So he finally was like, he wrote up a religious exemption. It got denied. So he ended up finding he's going to be working for Milwaukee Public Utility or Manitowoc Public Utilities now as an engineer. Put in his 2 weeks, wrote a phenomenal letter why he was quitting. And they were like shocked that he was quitting because he's so like well liked there. But he's like, then why would you allow us to be treated like this? And so he's like going to be done, I think, this Friday. Well, last week his boss came back to him and like begged him to stay. But in this time, there are people that some were getting their religious exemptions accepted, some weren't. Who gets to decide whose religion, So they were like, I think they said like, well, we will accept your religious exemption now or something, even though they had denied it. He's like, I'm done. He's like, I have a job lined up. He's like, I have a job lined up. My family's going to be fine. Do you know how many people you have destroyed their lives? They don't have jobs lined up. And you're begging me now to come back, even though I don't have any higher clout. He's just like, this is disgusting. But anyway, it's just like, it's a game, it's a complete game. We're getting off topic there. But anyway, yeah. Okay. So starting at the beginning of this, a self-refuting statement. I think we've heard, 2 or 2,000 self-refuting statements lately. But it's a statement that, if true, contradicts itself. Yeah. So faith is a much misunderstood word, and we need to make sure our kids know what faith is and what it isn't. We'll never be able to measure our souls in a beaker, and we'll never be able to put God under a microscope. I liked that little, but that's the same thing with science. There's so many things that you cannot measure with. I mean, even if they say the scientific method, well, then you would have every scientist agreeing with every method, with every date of how old the earth is, and they don't. I just posted, you mentioned the margarine thing. I posted like a week or two ago about how thalidomide, that women took in the 50s or whatever, for pregnancy, nausea, was causing missing limbs and all these birth defects. And then, eventually it comes out and, oh, okay, it's bad. We're going to take it off the market. But I'm like, I wonder how long that went on, that these babies were being born with this. But the doctor,
before someone made the connection that, yes, this is what's causing it.
And I'm sure there were people going, but then the doctors and whoever, CDC, whoever's running the show and back, just like now, were claiming, no, this isn't causing it. And so then they're like, they would believe it, because that's what, that's what they're being told right now too. But it's like, until they could have all the signs in front of them, like just completely all your evidence right there, and they will still deny it until like Mr. CDC tells them, a change. And that's, there's somebody in the church that our kids go to the school at. So we have, different church, and then our school, we're at a different church. But there's this one family there that ironically her dad is the president of the school board of Manitowoc that got turned, or he's not going to be on it anymore. So they're quite liberal minded, even though they attend this Wells church. And total maskers the whole time. And her three little girls, sweet little girls, the only kids left in the school that were still masking. And she would make a mask just even through the basketball season. She was making her 4th grader still wear her mask during games. And she was like, just so red. And then finally she let the girls take it off when Manitowoc Public dropped it like a month ago, because her mom's teaches at the public school too. Then it's safe. Now that the public school dropped it, now my little girls can take it off. Well, so they had it off, but she was still wearing it, the mom. Now I noticed today they're all wearing it again, because apparently Fauci's saying, oh, there's an uptick, and I'm thinking, you wore that the whole time. And then the doctor on CNN came out and literally told you the cloth ones weren't working. They never did. Oops, our bad. And so now they're wearing the paper ones. But it's like, didn't you learn from the first 2 years that they were wrong? Like, they were wrong on that.
Well, this is
Still going to believe them.
There was a thing I can't find it now, but anyhow, my light isn't very good right here.
Mm-hmm.
But it was talking about science can be interpreted depending on who's reading it and where they're coming from. So
Mhm.
there was plenty of other, I don't want to call scientists or experts or doctors or whoever, that were saying that the masks aren't helping, right?
Mhm.
So they're not, their degrees are just as good as Fauci's, right? But yet, why are they ignored? And I always bring up my husband for an example, because he was trained in
Mhm.
this years
Right.
ago.
Yeah.
This was his job, was to go
Right.
and he worked in the health and safety industry. And
Right.
he had to be trained. And what's going on now would have never, employers would have been like in trouble for forcing
Right.
people to wear this without being tested if they could handle it. And plus they had to deal with them correctly. And it came out that way early in the CDC, like, when you wear this, you have to do this, and people, they weren't doing it like that anymore. Changing them every so often. And where's the science here? Because you're not wearing them correctly to begin with.
Right.
But yeah, so it's like, so why do we believe one over an equally qualified,
Well,
degreed person?
exactly. And I said that from the beginning too. I said, if you would have even 95% of the medical community, scientists saying that this is this definitely is showing that this is going to be the best thing to do, I could have even understood. I still think there's that line of, well, people still should have this,
Mhm.
health freedom, but at the same time, like, I can understand why this is being pushed, but when you have literally more than 50%, you just have a couple of the big wig people saying this is, the Fauci and the whatever, but you have all these other super intelligent doctors. Like, can't think of his name right now just because it's escaping my mind, but like,
Yeah.
really big with the frontline.
Mhm.
He was like a world-renowned cardiologist, like a Nobel Peace Prize winner,
Mhm.
like so respected for so long in the medical community. And then COVID comes along and he's like, wait, not immediately, he waited a while, but as things kept turning, and he's like, and then he comes out and starts speaking. Now he's the devil, even though 30 years prior. So his science doesn't matter. It's just, and that's where, again, if we have, if God is our faith, And then everything under him is, let's make the best decision with the information we have. It shouldn't be such a hostile thing, but that's where, when we're going up against the world versus, believers versus unbelievers, believers versus the world, this sinful flesh, the devil, that's going to be our battle.
Right.
So,
I think the challenge has been that it's been believers against believers, though.
and
Yeah,
that
I can handle
yep.
somebody that's not from my faith, and somebody I don't know that I know doesn't share the same faith. I
Yep.
can deal with that better than having
Yep.
somebody in my church be upset with me.
Well, and
because
even
of
not
it.
just this topic of this health
Anything,
topic,
yeah.
but like with, there's this one very vocal lady that claims, she doesn't go to one of our churches, but she goes to one of the free churches here in town. She had a lot of different friends, she up until all of this, she was, people like, she was a nice woman. We don't know what happened. I think she just mentally, even my mom has said this too, like some people have just mentally lost it, really. But she is so like adamant that public school has to have all this LGBTQ stuff and CRT and social justice. Yet she claims she's Christian, and then she'll throw Bible verses in there, and it's like, why, but then, one of my friends said, well, Sarah, before I really, I was attending a church, and she's a non-denomination, but she said, we know that there's people that go to church that aren't actually believers, we don't know because we can't see their hearts. But I'm like, well, yeah, I know that, but I just wonder, why do they profess to be a Christian and have that be kind of their, like, and then say everything opposite of what the Bible, that's where I really struggle, is like, you feel like if you're on the same playing field, Christian to Christian, even though you're going to have disagreements with things, you're not going to be like disagreeing, like, just completely butting heads with biblical things, and yeah, I agree. That's been a big struggle. I've said that to my husband multiple times. Like, I can handle the unbelievers, like that's, but when it's people in your own denomination, or people that, parents of kids that your kids go to school with, like, that's been tough,
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay. The Greek word translated faith is, I'm going to say this wrong, pistis, P-I-S-T-I-S, which includes an element of being persuaded. So it's not blind faith, but there's an element of being persuaded. Humanly speaking, earthly speaking, what is usually required for you to become persuaded about something? Like, you two personally, if you, just something typically on earth, you go to the doctor, or you're going to buy some kind of insurance, or you're looking for homes, like what are things that are big things that like stick out to you that like would persuade you to make a decision, a big decision, life decision?
You'd want some kind of evidence that whatever it is you're trying to obtain is good, or what it says it is, that it's helpful, depending on what it is.
Yep.
That other people have had good results with it.
Yep.
Or who's ever selling it to you is trustworthy.
Yep.
Are a few things.
How is being persuaded different from conjuring up some feeling of belief? There's just kind of some thoughts that if you think of something, you can say it. If not, you can just think about it. But how is being persuaded different from conjuring up some feeling of belief?
Because isn't being persuaded just getting you to consider something? Whereas conjuring up a belief, the word conjuring has a different connotation.
Yeah, I know.
I hear that.
I've never seen that movie, and I never will. But like, that's what I think of now.
But I guess I feel like when we're talking about persuasion, usually if someone's going to persuade me, there's going to be at least a willingness on my part to consider what they have to say. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be successful, but I'm at least going to have a willingness to consider it.
Right.
Doesn't mean I'm switching to their belief right away, but
like you get the Kirby guy selling the vacuum cleaner, right? So they come over, you let them come over, and I have a Kirby, but anyway, okay.
Right.
So I can use
I
that
do
for an
too.
example. I used some, so my mother-in-law had one and hers lasted forever. Well, he came over and this was years ago. We did this thing and I was like, so that's an investment, right? So it's like, you want to see him use it. You want to be able to ask questions because he's trying to prove to you that this is a good thing for you to invest in, right? So you ask a lot of questions and you do your research and you see what he has to show. And plus we knew people that had one. So, we do all that, but when you're trying to bring something up out of yourself, that's more of like what you've experienced in your life, which causes you to think those things. I think that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. Some respond to apologetics by saying, if you knew everything, then you wouldn't need faith. If evidence persuades you to be more assured and more convinced that Christianity is true, then what does that do for your faith according to Hebrews 11:1? Increase it or decrease it? And that is also interesting because we read from Hebrews 11 in the devotion. It's just I just find that so cool.
Is it referring to the faith as being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see?
Yep. If evidence persuades you to be more assured and more convinced that Christianity is true, then what does that do for your faith according to Hebrews 11:1? Increase it or decrease it? Well, I think people forget, and the chapter talks about this too, that there is evidence of, there is evidence of Christianity. We have biblical, documentation of, Christ, his birth, his death, his resurrection, Mary being there. I mean, these things were written down, how they wrote it down in that time and then translated, but so you do have documentation, but then faith goes beyond that, obviously, but I don't know. I guess persuade, I mean, that's usually not the word that we think of when we're reading and studying the Bible, but if we are being taught something, read something, studying something, because that's how you are persuaded on earth to do things. You don't just drive down the road and be like, oh, that has a cool sign, I think I'm going to buy that insurance, I like that logo, versus like the insurance agent talking to you about why our insurance is best. And, so it's kind of the same thing with the Bible, with God's word, is hearing it, reading it, studying it.
When he tells us the more that we read God's word, the stronger, the more it helps our faith.
Yep. I liked the part in the book that talked about talking with your kids about, I think it was in the very end. And I got to remember to do that with my youngest, but to get out a crayon and paper and have them draw a picture and then say, so how did that picture get there? Was it you or the crayon? And then, well, it's both. And so, nature's like the crayon and God is the artist. So, we use both, we have both, but we know where our science, we know the source of our science, where I think when people don't believe in God, the triune God, they have no source for their science. So that's why science is their God, okay, let's go to, page 101, and then we'll get into the modernism, but so the word supernatural, meaning outside of nature. And I do think like for, even baby Christians, but definitely outside of Christianity, supernatural to them is a word. I mean, even in the movies, in the movie industry, we think of like supernatural and they think of psychics and aliens and magic. But, again, if we're going to study definitions and what the words actually mean, it's just super outside of nature. And again, this is why education is important, because if kids aren't being taught what these words actually mean, yeah. But let's see, let's turn to 102 and then get into the naturalism, the pre-modernism, modernism, post, and then now. So pre-modernism spans from the beginning of man until the mid 17th century. Religious leaders were seen as preeminent authorities, and revelation was assumed to have come from God or the gods. And this, Judeo-Christian, Greek, Mesopotamian, South American, African, in general, a denial of God was something that one had to be educated into. That one was like how opposite, like we still have to remember that God is sovereign and he's all powerful and omniscient and all these things. So like, we don't have to convince people to believe in God. Like we just share God, we share the word of God and pray for them. Like there isn't any magic tactics anymore but that's how I feel. We're living in a world like we have to try to convince. And I, even if it was possible to do that, we're way past any era of convincing anymore. But to be in the first 1700 or whatever years of, you had to be convinced out of it. I just, world. What a different world. But then I think it's interesting that, even looking back to the late 1800s and early 1900s, some of the like bloodletting, these things that were science, this was medicine. The doctor would come in and do the bloodletting or, put some
leeches
dead animal over a wound and, and that was the scientific thing. That wasn't even the woo-woo things. That was the science. So then you wonder like, it's kind of easy to think like, we must be really a lot smarter than those people were, which isn't, not true. It's easy to think that when you
work with what you got, they just,
when she talks about how much nonsense, the Greek mythology, 6 pomegranate seeds, the growing in winter seasons were attributed to the 6 pomegranate seeds that Persephone ate while a prisoner of Pluto, and thunder was a sign the gods were fighting. That was like normal to think that. So, okay. So I guess just more of a very like simple mind, and I think even like, less and less, but even the like Amish community, they are a little more simple-minded still, they've embraced more technology, but like they're young children that are, there's just a more simple thinking. They're just as sinful, but there is more. So that's what I think of completely pre-modernism is simple. Modern period started about 100 years after the scientific revolution. So AD 1543. This period marked the switch to the belief that people could answer these questions for themselves using reason, observation, and experimentation.
So this is kind of off topic, but just interesting, the dates of like 1543 was, your scientific revolution. You think about Gutenberg's press. How much did actually the ease of being able to print and share information and more people being able to read, how much of that played into all of these changes? Prior to that, everything was who you talked to and what you heard. So if you went to the church, you heard wherever your preacher was what you heard, or the people you were just in contact with day to day. That was it. Whereas once books and newspapers and all those things became
Yep.
the norm,
Yep.
more and more ideas were spread quicker and further into more and more people. And I wonder if that also tied into all of these ideas being shared.
Yep. Well, and you know, like in biblical times, Hebrew children, I mean, there was nothing like, I don't know what they would have come up to play with, you know, made up to play with in those days, but like they didn't have anything that we have today. So like they literally would memorize the scriptures. Like they would sit down for hours at a time and be taught the Hebrew. Like, so that's how, that was their knowledge, was they were being told, like nothing else, no other books, you know, not even math, none of that stuff. I mean, that was just all like hands-on, like learning day to day how to do things. Everything they were taught were like the scriptures. And up here, you know, that's kind of, that's mind-boggling to me. So we humans are idol creating machines. Science was a gift, and instead of using science like Johann Kepler did to think God's thoughts after him, people started using science as a means of replacing God. And
I thought that just when a lot of the stuff,
yeah,
not just when I was reading this book, but even before this, I had this thought about, if you go back to the Tower of Babel, I want to say it. So, you know, they were trying to be up in the heavens. They wanted to, right? So it was kind of one of those things like God, you know, they were like, look how great we are. And I almost feel like this is kind of like science now. Like you said, we've taken this tool now and people are using it the wrong way. And it's almost like our Tower of Babel. You know, it's like, look how smart we're getting. Look what we can create now, and all the stuff that they're doing with, you know, with genetics. And
well, just the fact that we are even arguing about male and female, like that to me is just another whole new level of the depravity that God talks about in the Bible, about how they will make up evil things. Like, you know, I always think like death is so hard, you know, to lose a loved one, but like, then I think what a blessing to die, because, you know, like our grandparents, but I know by the end of their lives, they were just like, oh, you know, they couldn't even fathom, like, you know, what was happening. I can't imagine my grandpa and grandma still being alive, hearing that we are literally in the news. We have elected a Supreme Court justice who won't define a male and a female. And now she's for life, because that's apparently how we do the Supreme Court. No term limits with Supreme Court. So what? Like, and that's not new. People have been acting or feeling differently from their gender since the beginning of time. I mean, look at, you know, way back to ancient times, there were men that dressed up as women, or, you know,
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah. I mean, but like, no one was arguing what a male and a female were. Like, that just wasn't so. And it's not even, I mean, I just can't believe that it's actually something that is almost like it's like that it's just set in place now. Like, this is what you know, our paid people on TV and government get to decide, that this is how we're going to do it. So everyone else who's thought like everyone since the beginning of time, now you're wrong. Like, that's,
look how unscientific. 1 minute they're feeding us, well, this is the science, do this, but this is like so unscientific that, you know, you can just make up whatever you want now, and because it's what people want, they'll go with it. But yet you got to believe this science because here are the peer-reviewed studies, you know.
Yeah.
And it just contradicts itself.
Yep. So here's a question. Your child, your student, whoever comes to you and asks, how can we believe in God when we can't see him and he can't be proven scientifically? And so how do you respond? And pages 100 to 101 kind of help us with that. But, you know, because there's other things out there too that exist, but they aren't suited to be scientifically tested. And nobody really spends time refuting that. But if you were to come to Christianity and God, they'd go all crazy about trying to prove that. So, you know, if we go to those pages, we have to turn back, but like, you know, if you had a student or your child that said, well, how can you, and I'm sure we've been asked this before, well, how do we believe in him if we can't see him? You know, how are some things, what are some ways that we can
I
respond?
had that come up.
Mhm.
I had that come up,
Yeah.
was it this year or last year? And they weren't asking because they didn't believe, they just had a legitimate question, you know? And I remembered one thing, I don't remember where I heard it from, but it just stuck in my head in that moment. So I said, well, can you see the air right now?
Mhm.
You know, that kind of thing. And they're like, well,
Mhm.
no. I'm like, well, then how do you know it's there? Well, because
Uh-huh.
I'm breathing. I'm like, okay, so
Yep.
you can't see it, but you know, if
Yep.
it wasn't there, you wouldn't be able to breathe and we'd all fall over right now. Or like you
Yep.
talk about the wind, you can't see the wind, but you can see what it does.
Right.
So those are things that we can't see, but we know that they're doing something.
Yep.
And we can see that all around us,
Yep.
either by the nature around us or even just like who we are, our thoughts and, you know, our feelings and those different things. They just can't be from nothing.
Yep. And I think just reminding them too, again, of all the other scientific things that can't be measured scientifically. Because again, if they could, then every scientist would say the world is exactly this many days and hours old, and it came about exactly this way. But you know, even their Big Bang theory, they all have different Big Bang theories, you know, like how, so there is no, you cannot scientifically prove that.
And it's
So
a
then
theory.
again,
That's what kills me. It's
yeah,
a theory. A theory is
right,
not fact.
right,
So it should not be taught as fact.
right. Yes. So, okay. On page, well, between pages 102 and 105, you know, we're in the middle of these, we're on the modernism right now. We're kind of starting to talk about that, but a pivotal factor in each of these philosophical perspectives is how a person determines what is true. In other words, how do we know things? Understanding how someone determines truth is imperative for understanding the best way to present the evidence for Christianity to them. And you two being teachers, obviously, that probably resonates with you. Like, just like one student learns better, you know, okay, math, take math, you know, you have all these different ways you can teach math, you know, and with like even homeschooling last year when I was buying, well, when I was looking for curriculum, I'm like, oh, you know, there's Saxon, there's Singapore, there's whatever, there were all these different, you know, manipulatives, there's the Charlotte Mason, like there's all these different ways to do math, but in the end, you come to the same answer, right? Like,
Right.
you know, mathematically, you're gonna get a number that's right or wrong. And actually, I don't know if it was in this book, and if we haven't got to it yet, or if it's in the other book, but that they're legitimately are schools teaching math where it's a collective effort. So, you know, like history or, you know, other things where like, okay, you get in your little pods and you know, you have this question and you have to come to a collective consensus answer for it to be right. So, you know, because you can debate, there's certain things you can debate, but you can't debate math. Like in the end, 2 + 2 is 4, right? So this math curriculum was saying that these kids doing math, if all 4 of them couldn't get to the same answer, they all got it wrong. So 3 kids in the group could have done their math problem and got the answer right. And then Sally over here could just not be understanding the problem and not getting it right. And so unless she can get it right and understand, everyone gets the answer wrong. So it was like a mark against the kids that got it right, because they just looked at the problem and they were like, well, I know how to do that. And these were like little kids. So it was really confusing. So this, where was this story? The mom said her little boy loved going to school. I think it was like first grade or something. He had always loved school, every day loved it. And all of a sudden he just started like throwing huge temper tantrums in the morning, couldn't get him out of bed. They'd take him to school. He would just melt down. He would scream and cry, wouldn't want to go in there. And they found out it was all because he was like a very math-minded kid. And it frustrated him so much that he's getting answers wrong because his little pod couldn't, come to the right answer because Sally didn't get math and couldn't understand it. So like, I just thought that is what a messed up way to teach 6 and 7-year-olds. Like they just need to know that they are doing a math problem and they got it right or wrong. I don't know. That's crazy to me, I guess. Yeah. The history of science is like the history of all failed relationships, progressing through 3 phases: infatuation, disillusionment, and rejection. That is so true. Okay, so then we get to postmodernism. If you have anything you want to like interject, just stop me and interject. So, modernism is observation, experimentation. Postmodernism is also observation and experimentation, but instead of it being man's collective reasoning ability, it's now turned into, that's a trick question. There's no way to know for sure. Science became just as dogmatic and diverse as religion, and still is, and Darwinism morphed into social Darwinism, a deeply dehumanizing belief which taught that different races of people are at various stages of evolution. This horrific philosophy paved the way for supposedly scientific rationale for racism and justified new and creative evils like eugenics and the sickening experiments done on the Jews. Okay, so postmodernism, teaching that there is no such thing as absolute truth and nothing can be known. And there would be 2 self-defeating statements. It just makes my head spin. Like, I don't know how people can like believe that and then be so rooted in believing that. Like, the whole like your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. Like to an extent you can get that, but then it's like when you get to just factual things and you just feel like you're in a dream. Like, are we really doing this? Like,
Right.
Are we talking about this?
I mean, to me, my truth, when what that started out with is, this is my truth, that should only pertain to your story, like, this is my experience. So for me, this is difficult,
yes.
Or for me, this is what this emotion this creates in yours or something like that. But
right.
It is extended to now that things that either are true or not true, there should be no, and we see that happening, like when we were just talking about in schools now, between, you don't know what gender you are, or like, I feel like a cat today, it's just like, and you say, this is my truth. It doesn't matter for you, but this is, if I feel like a person can be deep down, be an animal or this or that, okay, just because you say it's your truth doesn't mean it's true. I mean, right. Either it is or it isn't. There's some things that are black and white.
Well, and when you think about different religions, like even Hinduism or past lives, the people that believe in past lives or reincarnation, like like in Hinduism, they really believe you could have been a cow or you're going to be a butterfly or something. So we've always known that, right? Like we always knew Hindu, but I never, ever, ever would have fathomed the day where like humans right now living and breathing would start acting like anything other than, unless they were psychologically not healthy. And then that's why we have mental health, because we do know, I mean, in this world, sin causes all sorts of things. And so we don't make fun of that. We don't, they need help. They need prayer. But now we're saying, embrace it, like, and shame on, like, I just wonder, like, when is psychology going to be like, just, it probably won't ever go away because people will want it for their own benefit, I guess, but when, the person that's struggling with the psychological disorder and they don't want to be like that versus the person that same person, but they're embracing it. Like when are we going to like pedophilia, that's the next thing that just is terrifying, because it's even right now, it's at a thought process where even 25 years ago, we would have never have heard. I mean, every day I keep seeing posts on Facebook where people will show an ad they saw somewhere, of love is love. And it's, an adult holding, this person's hand, but there are these groups and it's like, there's no, I don't know. There's no justifying that. And I don't know. But anyway, we'll keep moving on here. Naturalism isn't new. It dates back as far as 500 BC with the Greek atomists. But Romans 1:20 says that God has made himself plain to us through what has been made. Creation screams creator. Mm-hmm. To silence the voice of nature, man must construct ever more clever ways of shouting louder. So 3 things. Every hypothesis has to have, every hypothesis is eventually reduced to something that 1 has always existed, so is eternal. 2 needs no creator or is self-existent, and 3 is sufficiently powerful to create. And this is what Aristotle called the first cause. Okay, so here are a few things that your kids might ask you. The material world has always existed. Does this sound like a lot like Hebrews 13:8, where Jesus says, where Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever? The universe was never created, then there's no need for a creator. Genius. However, you are still left with an unprovable assumption based on faith. That's hardly a step forward, scientifically speaking.
I think our kids need to realize we have to help them understand that, like, a statement like that, like, it takes just as much faith to assume that the world has always been there, because there's no evidence to prove it any more than there's evidence to show. I mean, nobody was there when the world was created, or when the world wasn't created, if you want to go with that.
I think it takes more faith
to
believe.
Yeah.
Or it takes more blind faith to believe in that, because at least with what we're doing, there's writings on it,
Yes.
And that there was nobody to view anything, know nothing. And so how do you make all these assumptions? Because that's all that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then in the end, it's like, if that's what they want to believe, then I can't force you to not believe that, but you can't force that as a truth on people then. Mm-mm. And that goes back to everything else we see, like, how you choose to deal with your health problems. That should be a choice through, you know, education, through prayer, through your own personal beliefs and convictions. You know, I was just talking with someone the other day who said it's just so scary. And it's somebody that works kind of within the legal system. It's so scary to know what like Child Protective Services now can decide as being an unfit mother. You know, well, yeah, there's definitely situations where, you know, if a mother is completely strung out and her children are, you know, nobody's caring for them, like that is a dangerous situation. Those kids do need, but like now you could have, like this, there's this situation right here in town. The guy works at the ammo place, and they're foster parents, and they're young, like she's not even, I think she's like 12. She wants a surgical bulge. Like, yeah, she's identifying as a man. So apparently that's a thing you can get. I didn't even know. And there, of course, as a foster parent, we're like, no, you know, first of all, she's in a foster system. So she's already struggling, you know, who I don't know what she's seen and the abuse she's been, but they're trying to just parent her the best they can as a foster parent. They are being forced to make her get this surgery. The CPS has decided that she wants it. This is how she, you know, so she gets to get it. This is right in Manitowoc.
I just saw a post. It wasn't about that in particular, but so this lady's young, I would say she's like in her late 20s or she's in her 20s, and she's decided, you know what, I never want to have, now I'm not saying I agree with her or not agree, but it's like two sides of the same coin here. She wants to has a hysterectomy because she doesn't feel like she ever wants to have kids. Okay. The doctors won't, you know, she has to have a referral to have that done. The doctors are telling her, well, we don't want to give you that surgery because you may change your mind down the road. Okay. But in the same token, like you're saying, they'll force foster parents or a parent to let a kid go on hormone blockers and have surgical procedures done at a young age, but they're not done growing. So isn't that kind of like the same, isn't that the same, you know, two sides of the same coin? You won't let this adult who is an adult and can make her own decisions. Like, I don't, you know, she will have to deal with the consequences if later on she wants to have it, but she's an adult, right?
Right.
But here's this child, you're going to let them do this very invasive surgery that can have consequences down the road if they're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. They're not an adult yet.
Which
so
there was just, and there was just
how is that right?
Doesn't make any sense. That's not logical.
It's not logical
or scientific.
Because they're kids change their minds all the time. I always think back when I was doing pre-K, and I had this little boy who just every few weeks he would change what he was. I mean, and it was just, and I look at this, so like he comes like, I'm a ninja. I'm like, okay. So, you know, he likes to pretend he's a ninja. Now, let's just change that around, because that's what kids are like. One day they want to be Batman, one day they want to be a ninja, right? So if I were to do what these people are doing now with these little kids, saying, I think I want to be a boy today, or I want to be a girl, or I want to be this. And they're like, oh, really? And they delve into that and they psychologically pump these kids up. And I'm thinking, well, if I would have done that with this little boy who wanted to be a ninja, and I said, oh, you are a ninja? And if I would have played into it, it's the same psychological, I would have never done that. You know, I might play around for a little bit, you know, because we're playing, like, okay, let's go back to kids, you know? Right. But now they're taking that and they're just, you know, kids do that all the time, you know, and, you know, down to 5 years old now. And it's like the new, it almost seems like parents, I want to be one of those parents that has one of those kids, you know, so they're watching and they're just waiting for that one little thing. Like, oh, is my kid one of those kids, you know?
And I know, I agree with you. There was some mom on TikTok that someone showed me this TikTok, how she was, she had a baby. He was like a baby, like under 1. And she's like, my baby's gay. And you think like she's trying to be, but she was trying to be like, you know, like, snide in her, like, cause you know, she was basically making fun of parents who say, they have a baby and they're like, this is my boy, because he has boy parts and he has these chromosomes, and this is my girl, and oh, he's going to be a heartbreaker, oh, she's going to be a princess. Like, yes, like those are things that sometimes people will say, or like even the older generations more, and we know not every girl loves princess stuff, but we know not every boy likes, but like, it's just, who cares? Like, they're babies, they don't know. And so she just thinks that's so terrible that she's like, you're all labeling your children as heterosexual when you don't know, so I'm just labeling mine as gay. And so she was just doing it to be, but like, she is super, super liberal. And I'm like, if that's honestly what you're doing and like raising him that way, then that's just, you're doing your own indoctrination. Like, nobody is doing that to try to indoctrinate. They're just saying their kids are a boy and a girl. Like, why can't we just have some, why is it wrong to put your boy in blue jeans and a baseball cap, when they're 1 year old for their pictures, and put your little girl in a dress and a bow if you want to? Like, even every parent has their own style. Like, they are, I just, like, why has this become such a thing? Like,
Or you think about like the Tom, you think about Tom girls. Like when we were growing up, it's like,
oh,
I
I was
seen the meme
totally
too,
one
like,
for a
thank you
long
parents
time.
for not giving me a sex change when I was going
Mhm.
through my tomboy phase.
I had two brothers. I was sandwiched between two brothers. Like, and I never thought, like, I like to do girly stuff too, but I love doing a lot of boy stuff. And it just, and even in high school, I went through phases. Like, my sophomore year, I was all like, ooh, dark and into Beatles and like always wearing like flannels, and, and then in junior year, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I love pink. And I'm, that's what kids go through. They go through these, and they need their parents there to, put up with us and just be our stability, not our, what says unstable more than your parent going, oh, you don't want to be a boy? Okay. Like, oh yeah, I don't know. The multiverse theory, this I just remains highly conjectural, bordering on theology rather than hard science. And even if the multiverse hypotheses were true, it doesn't solve the issue. It just moves the problem back a step and multiplies it. If there are infinite universes, then where did they all come from? I kid you not. The answer is that there is a multiverse generator. And guess what properties it has? It is eternal, uncreated, and apparently capable of creating repeatedly. Please, someone explain to me how this is a simpler and less faith requiring hypothesis than belief in God.
I would like to ask, where is this generator and how do you know about it?
Yeah. And where are
Convince me.
Where are
Right?
these infinite universes? And
Show me how you know
where are
it's
the
there.
pictures of them? And
Because I've
Persuade
never
me.
seen this.
Yeah. I like natural laws are capable of creating. When she said they did a podcast called How Educated Do You Have to Be to Identify Nonsense? Lennox, who is so Stephen Hawking, who we all knew, and then this John Lennox. I like when they have those debates, like the atheist and the Christian. But Hawking claimed that because the law of gravity exists, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. This led Lennox to respond that nonsense is still nonsense, even when spoken by world famous scientists. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to call out nonsense. Like, God just gave us an ability to, like, sure, there's some more like there's some denser people out there, and there's some, but like overall, anyone with cognition you can call out nonsense. And we are being forced to argue nonsense, which goes back to the entire thing of gaslighting. I mean, that's what our world is right now. It's just this like circle of gaslighting. And unless you're rooted in God's word, you really could go nutty, like how you're being told every day that you're the crazy one, you're wrong, you're mean, you're hateful, you're all this stuff. Man, it's just not true. It's nonsense. Natural laws describe things. Oh, I like this too. Natural laws describe things. They don't generate things. 2 plus 2 never put $4 in anyone's pocket. I like that one because I'm like, what a great way to point those two things out. Natural laws describe, but they don't generate. Because 2 plus 2 is 4. For what? It didn't give me $4. It didn't give me 4, it just.
It is what it is.
4. What? What? Yeah, exactly. The diameter of nothing is nothing. So, all right, moving on. Let's see. Mid-1800s, French scientist Louis Pasteur conducted experiments that once and for all slew the behemoth of spontaneous generation, which is life coming from non-life. The chicken or the egg. What came first, the cell or the? And that's where I think, like in public school, because you can't talk about how really things were created. So that's a huge, I think, problem in and of itself, is what they're being taught, just even from a very early age on, even if it's labeled as science, but it's putting it in these children's head right from the get-go that God couldn't possibly be real then. I just think, whereas again, like when my mom would have went to public school, that wasn't really what was being taught. But today, these are what kids are being taught. I just think it's what a battle for parents that have their kids in public school. If they had like a foundation of Christian school and then maybe went to public high school, that is even different than, 4K on being taught this way, basically the opposite of creation. That it was spontaneous.
To me, it's never logically made sense to me, because you can't, science teaches you can't get something from nothing. You can't get something from nothing. So even whatever, where did that come from? Where did that energy has to come from something.
Right. Right. I know. So what are the two main messages of naturalism? On page 109 is where you'll find that answer, but the two main messages of naturalism. It's just the 1 and 2 there on 109, that supernatural will eventually be explained away by science, and that nature is all there is.
I love the word eventually. So when eventually.
Yeah, just like we don't know at all when and how, we also just eventually is just a word. And I do think that's why people maybe sometimes, even though deep down there's that fear of death, but like if they kind of just think that it just kind of goes away, like that the worst that'll happen is like you die and then you're gone and you're just in the ground and that's it. Like,
that's always bothered me, like with people that believe that, because it's like, if you really, 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 truly believe that, then really there is no point of being here and living. Really.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's like, what a depressing life. So then what's the point of you even trying to tell me this? Because it really doesn't matter.
Yes. Like why do you care? Like
why do you get upset? Why do you get upset if I believe in God? Because it really, if we're all, what a depressing world this is. Then why is there love? Why is there hate? Why are all these, why do we have wars? Why don't we just, really, we could just, I don't mean this, but technically we should just all kill each other and just be done with it, because it really doesn't matter. There's no purpose to anything.
Right. But it's because they don't actually believe that. They're coming off saying that, but because we know they have a natural knowledge that they're denying, and they don't even understand. Like they have a fear that they have something inside. They just don't know what to call it yet because they refuse to believe in God.
So
But it's
basically it's a rebellion against what's naturally.
yes. Yeah. If they really believed what they say they believe, they would all be like, you know, there wouldn't be
Doesn't matter.
arguing and fighting it. Yeah. I mean, everyone would commit suicide, really. I mean, that because I mean, I think when people take their life, that's really what they are thinking in that moment.
And I'm thinking, then why is there misery? Why do people feel then if it's what? Yeah, it's just a vicious circle is what it is to me. It makes no sense.
Right.
So.
I know. Right. Well, so then what do? We recognize the message, which is what we just talked about there. The two main messages of naturalism. We recognize that okay, this is what they're professing. This is what they're saying. But then we get into this, the discernment part of it, that's not really what they believe. Because if they really believe that, they wouldn't be left. They would be done. They would have either taken each other out or committed suicide, because there would be nothing, absolutely nothing to live for. So they are living for something. Identify and explain one or more things that we can learn from naturalism. That is, what truth does it offer? Or what motives can we dignify? And we can list a couple, or even on your own, you can think of that later too. Like, what are some positive things from naturalism, or a truth, even a partial truth?
Could you say that again?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
what identify and explain one or more things that we can learn from naturalism. That is, what truths does it offer, or what motives can we dignify? So basically, I mean, on page 110, when we're offering discernment, why are people drawn to naturalism? There must be something that, what is a truth we can find from it? What is a, let's see. Okay, so like, we cannot downplay the amount that nature does explain. Verses like Philippians 4:8, which talks about our thought life, have commonly been considered good principles to live by, but not concrete solutions to serious problems. So, we talk about in the Christian world, neuroscience, stress response, like listening to your body. I mean, I'll even talk about that, like with coaching, but I'm not talking about it from a, your body's your God and it's going to give you all the answers you need. But like, if you are every day getting up feeling like you have had no rest, if you have no energy, if you are falling asleep anytime you sit down, your body's probably saying you're not getting something, or something isn't right, or maybe I should go see somebody and have some tests run, or maybe I just know I'm not getting enough sleep because I'm making some choices that are keeping me up. Whatever it is, like those are things that the natural material world will talk about, so there's truth to that, but it's not a truth that matters for like eternity or our salvation. It's physiological. So, it can have some good principles to live by. Thanks to neuroscience, epigenetics, we've come a long way. There's things, people can have longer lives, obviously by God's grace, but like, Parkinson, neurological things. Science has taught us a lot that, all the centuries before, they would have been gone by 30 or 40 years old with that. So those are great things, but then we look at them as gifts from God, not, man's, evolving to higher, whatever. Yeah. Okay. So this is one thing though, too, like, okay, because like even in our Christian day schools, and I'm sure you guys, like our science teacher, and I do really like them, like, because our textbooks, which this is always like, there's so many, we have so many great textbook companies out there now that sometimes I'm like, oh, wish we maybe would start looking into some different, science textbooks or whatever. But like, because they're all, the ones that I grew up on too, like they teach the evolution, and then your teacher will say, well, this is what evolution does, and this isn't true, blah, blah, blah. But like, why not buy the science books that teach all the science stuff, but then teach creation from a Christian creative view, but also talk to them about, but this is what the world thinks, because we don't want to hide these things. Obviously, we want our kids to be prepared.
Yeah.
But like my 7th grader, I feel like, man, you guys are spending a lot of time on that, like a lot of homework on it. And I just feel like, why so much homework and like grading on learning about evolution when, I don't know, what do you guys think? Like your
I
teacher?
was when we had our teachers conference in February.
Okay.
One of the breakout sessions that I went into with one of our Wells, I'm not sure exactly what his degree is, but I should find, and maybe you know who he is, but he's got a lot of books, little booklets out, and even how to talk to children. And
Okay.
I brought that up to him
Yeah,
about,
okay.
the textbooks and everything.
Yeah.
Because first and second grade, I have a lot of kids that like dinosaurs, like,
Right.
whoa. So, like what, and I have some parents that shy away from that. And I don't think necessarily just keeping them from it is good. And so he kind of reiterated that, have the textbook that, but use that as an opportunity to say, this is what the world is going to teach you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is what we need to know about it. And this is why we don't believe that. Because they're, especially as they get older, that's what they're going to be faced with. And if they don't know how to
Yep.
differentiate between, what is a theory and what the
Yep.
world is trying to teach them, because the world doesn't want to believe in God.
Yep.
They're not going to know how to deal with that on their own. And that's when they're easily swayed.
Yep. And I do, and I do completely agree with you there. And I do, like, again, the teacher that he has for that, I really respect this teacher. He's so, he can be really hard, like, and make him work really, really hard. And he's more, but I like his old school approach too. And so I know he's teaching the kids that. Sometimes I get like, especially like a lot of the newer teachers coming out, even from like our Wells schools, you really sometimes you're getting a lot more of like, huh? Just because I've heard from my teacher friends stuff that they've heard, like, so like one of my friends who teaches in one of the schools here, they have a newer teacher there who's like more woke, and he like hated Trump. Okay, fine. But like, let's not talk to the kids about that. Like and he said something like, oh, he said something about the insurrection. And she walked by the classroom and she's like, what? But like saying it was an insurrection, like, and then kind of bashing Trump. And then, what else did he say? It was something like not, I can't remember what it was, but she did talk with them then. And he's like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have said that. So I just, even like at the high school here, I know that, really sweet girl, but like 2-3 years out of MLC, and my son Sawyer was like, she was at a Black Lives Matter rally, like, she had a picture up in her office with her friend at a Black Lives Matter rally. I was like, okay. So I mean, he's a junior. This was when he was a sophomore, so like I could talk to him about that, like, well, okay. And I've had a lot of these conversations with my boys, like, but I'm just like, it's like I'm trying to understand what they're thinking, like, because I'm not 23 anymore, and I'm trying to, okay, you profess Jesus as Lord, you went through MLC, but like, where are we missing? Like, I don't know. Like, how would you, like,
I think, yeah,
I mean, it was like the
kids
fist and
aren't learning their, how do I say this? We're exposed to so much more worldly stuff than even when we were growing up.
everything.
We
Yeah.
had quite a bit, but so
Mhm.
much. There's like so many little things. You got parents that are very busy. They're both having to work a lot. And you got things where you have the internet and you have so much more for them to easily obtain. You've got influencers. I think so much is taken from the parents, you know, that pull. How do I even see it now where you have people coming out and saying, you know, we need to teach the schools need to teach the kids more. It shouldn't be up to the, you know what I'm saying? There's less parent interaction, there's less discernment.
Mhm.
Just open conversations with kids. I also too think sometimes in our churches, we're people that should say something, they're made to feel like, well, you shouldn't talk about that because
Mhm.
it's political. But it's like, to me, I was just talking to my husband about this. Some of this stuff isn't political anymore. It's just been made that way, but it has to do with morals. And we're not having these conversations at a young, I'm not saying like little kids, but we're as age appropriate as they grow. We're not always having these conversations with our kids from a biblical standpoint like we should. And when you talk about that student and being in a Black Lives Matter thing, are they just getting this from social media with the virtual signaling and this is what you do to be a
Right.
good person?
Right.
But really, are you looking into what that really means? And why are some of my friends not into that? Maybe I should find out why they don't think that's a great thing.
Right. And I'm wondering if at that point when, because this was like beginning of sophomore year, so then this is over a year and a half ago, you know, I can see where, again, I'm somebody I'm always researching this stuff. I'm reading about it. Many people don't do that. So they're seeing it as, well, that's a good thing. And, you know, she is a very like, love everybody and very sensitive and like cry, you know. So of course, Black Lives Matter because everyone's lives matter. So I don't think they understand. Like, I know they don't. That, well, do you know that it's actually a branch of Planned Parenthood? And do you know that blah, blah, blah? You know, you go all these things back. So it's not the concept, it's the actual organization. And then, but that takes time, you know, to educate somebody on that. So, you know, my kids hear this stuff. They because they hear me talking about it. So then I can at least say, hey, I know you don't know all of that, but like, you know, the gist of how this is actually a branch of Planned Parenthood, which is, you know, if they really cared about Black lives, like that's the number one killer of Black lives right there is Planned Parenthood. Like, you know, the 13% of America that's Black, the most babies killed in Planned Parenthood still come from the Black population, you know, because it's a genocide. Like they are killing that population, but then now they're coming off trying to be all social justice because outside the womb is all that matters, not, you know, inside. So, yeah, it's tough. Well, anyway, I know we're getting kind of late here, so we can kind of just quickly move to this last page. The lies that science and Christianity are at odds. Of course, we don't believe that, because you can't have science without Christianity. I mean, that's science comes from God. The belief that universe is governed by natural laws that are testable, reliable, and which can be harnessed was originally a Christian idea grounded in the character and attributes of the Christian God. So basically it started from Christianity, like science started from Christians.
Right.
Lie 2, that science uses facts, religion uses faith. False. Both science and Christianity are a mixture of facts and faith as long as we are properly defining faith. Science relies more heavily on repeatable observations, but ultimately grounded on a philosophy that interprets all the data. And this is where, again, two scientists can look at the same data and come to different conclusions, which was what we saw and still see in the medical world vaccines, masks, so it should be a choice, right? Like I'm seeing a lot more data that says this actually. Like I'm going to choose this one. No, you can only choose this one. If you don't choose this one, you can't have a job. Like what? So blind faith is easy to lose. Faith grounded in evidence is harder to walk away from. And let's see. An important value in both science and Christianity is a spirit of humility, which should not be confused with the spirit of compromise. So then, this next week, you could, just the whole idea of like in school, like this is being teachers, you could do the whole have your kids draw a picture with crayon. And then, was it you or was it the crayon? The answer is both. Nature is like the crayon and God is like the artist. No amount of explaining the properties of the crayon can ever explain how the picture ended up on paper. So that would be kind of, or older kids, talk with your kids about the correct definition of faith. Emphasize that faith is putting our trust in someone or something that has proven itself to be trustworthy. Because again, faith is used, it's a universal word now, right? But biblical faith and this universal faith are completely different, but it is putting your trust in something or someone. Bring it back to apologetics and Jesus and show how God sent Jesus in the flesh, in history, to die and rise again, with lots of witnesses who saw Jesus after the resurrection, wrote it down. Explain that we as Christians can feel secure knowing that we are placing our faith in something that really took place. So, and then Holy Week of all weeks to talk about that, like 1 Corinthians 15, you're either putting your faith in multiple scientists with multiple theories about a multiple ideas of a Big Bang theory that no one ever saw and is absolutely no proof. They're just guessing off of like quantum physics and all these things, or going off of something that really did happen. And there is proven literature, like even unbelievers and atheists and agnostics know that Jesus Christ was a person on earth. There's literature of how they wrote and wrote literature. But so would you rather have that belief in something that there is physical proof that was seen and documented, or just this random explosion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have to choose, you got to choose one or the other. And to me, it's like, again, we're not arguing someone into believing this, but it's just, it's like, if I had those two choices, like Big Bang, big explosion, nobody saw it, and no hope of eternal life with no sadness, pain, whatever, or somebody saw this, unbelievers and believers, the soldiers saw it. Wrote it down, things they actually said, like the Roman soldier when he was like, this must be the Son of God, or and then and the hope of eternal life because of that. Like you got to choose one. And yeah, so I don't know, it would be a good thing this week with Holy Week to bring that up.
Yeah.
And then one other, discussion questions, and these are in your book, but what is something in nature that's always left you amazed? That's something we could talk to our kids about, or students. Science is a gift from God, but people have used it to replace him. Emphasize that science is a means to study what God made, but could never explain the purpose of his creation. So, any other final thoughts?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, why don't we just pray? I could just read this pause for prayer. We haven't done that one yet. Okay, so we can pray. Lord, I acknowledge you as supernatural. You are outside of nature, transcendent. Nature is not all there is. A mind was needed to create nature. You are the mind, the wisdom behind the universe. You have left your thumbprint both in your creation and in your word. Science is not my savior. Nature is not my savior. Forgive me for the times when I dismiss your word as my ultimate authority and my source of truth. Thank you for the role that Christianity has played in science. I thank you that you reveal yourself through creation and that science allows us to think your thoughts after you. We proclaim that science and faith are friends. You created a finely tuned universe that speaks your name with every constant and equation. I am grateful that you have given me more than a body. You have also given me a soul. May I and my kids, our kids, proclaim that nature screams creator and that his name is Elohim. Lord, grant my children insight to not be fooled by things that sound smart and mysterious. Give them inquiring minds and wisdom to distinguish between truth and speculation. Protect our schools and churches from these lies. For those who are blinded to your truth and who dismiss the supernatural from the start, lead them to honest inquiry and to follow the evidence where it leads, straight to you. Help our children understand science as a natural theology that helps them learn more about you. In the name of our Creator, amen. And I'm going to post too. I don't think I posted it or sent it to you, but I listened to this podcast. I love it. It's called, what is it called? It's Pastor Kuntz, but he's a Missouri Synod pastor, but it's such a good, I mean, my husband listens to it, A Brief History of Power. And it's Dr. Kuntz from the Missouri Synod Concordia. And then, who's the other guy? Jonathan Fisk. And he did a podcast last Thursday. It's called Drinking Water from Our Own Wells. And he talks about the history of Lutheran schooling in this. So it talks about the Missouri Synod history of school, but it's very similar, obviously, to what, because we were the same synod.
Right.
But like the whole purpose of school, of the Christian day schools, the Lutheran schools, and just even the types of education that it's really, really interesting. And I think that we could learn like so much of like you can still use technology and all these great things without sacrificing, the main reason for, because I mean, so much of even listening to this, I mean, I grew up in a synod home, I grew up as a pastor's kid and I didn't even know some of this stuff, but if you read Martin Luther's writings, it's all follows as what he encouraged, yeah, it was really interesting. I think you girls would really like it. So I'll post it. Because I know you have tons of time, but I always do it like when I'm folding laundry. So
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thanks for showing up. Next week we don't have it because it's Easter. So we'll meet the following Sunday.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.